There's an app for that.
There's an app for that. Well, there's an app for this. There's an app for Blog Talk Radio Conversation called The Question with Doug Pagitt every Tuesday during the summer, joined by Carla Barnhill, parenting advocate and blogger over at themommy.revolution.com, talking about the friendship disparity between men and women and the impact that that has on society, culture, and men and women. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
So Carla has
anyway,
been...
So that,
yeah, go on.
Well, I was going to say, the first 10 minutes there, we sort of discussed this. I think it becomes problematic because men and women are often not allowed to have these long, deep conversations together. But then the fallout to me is that, both men and women really miss out on something that is good and right, and that's the interaction and the way that, men and women do think about things differently. We look at things differently. And there's a lack of synergy, I think, when you don't get the perspective of the other gender involved in whatever you're doing. And women, I think, if we want to bring it back to just friendship and parenting, there are times, like I think about I'm a woman who's always had lots of male friends. And those men have been invaluable to me in my personal growth and in my professional development. And if I didn't have the opportunity to sit and have deep, meaningful conversations with the men in my life, I wouldn't be the person I am now. And I'd like to think that they would be less because of it too,
for sure.
without my input in their life. And so to me, when we sort of deny each other that, when we say, well, it's not appropriate for you to have deep, meaningful friendships with members of the opposite sex because you're a married person, that to me, it's just robbing us of the goodness that comes out of those friendships.
Right.
And it's sad to me. And what I think is interesting about it is that the reasons that we have those sort of parameters in place all have to do with really underestimating the ability of men in particular to be friends with women. Like, you think about it, those things are often set up in, well, you don't want to cross any lines, and you don't want to, the whole, make sure you always have an open door. Don't ever ride anywhere with just, the Billy Graham rule where he'd never be in a car with a woman.
Right,
alone.
right.
Which, I get it. I get the reason behind it. But really, the men are so incapable of seeing a woman as anything other than a sexual object that they can't have a conversation with her alone. Really?
Right, yeah.
It's like, so are we really going to underestimate men that much?
Right.
And if a guy really believes that about himself, well, grow up.
Yeah.
Get over it. Because it's not right if you're a man to not be able to see beyond a woman's sexuality and see her as a whole human being.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Get over it.
Like maybe if
problems you have, grow up.
Yeah, like maybe if that's your issue, you should not be spending your time leading whatever organization you're leading.
Right.
Maybe you should be working on that issue.
Right.
But
figure it out, buddy.
But it has a rich religious. It does have a rich religious history, which quite often, we do find that the religious background to some of these topics gets so deeply in the way. But there is that rich religious history, isn't there? That in certain Islamic cultures, it's very much that way, and in certain pietistic Christian cultures, it's that way. And there's people who even tell the story all the way back, to the narratives of creation and try to say that's how it's supposed to be. So, it's not just a particular social thing of friendship.
No.
It's this deep fear of sexuality. Yeah. Right. And this is one of the things that I know, and I've made references to why people get freaked out about homosexuality before, because I think it's much more complex. But this is another one of those things that I know freaks out some people about homosexuality. In other words, they know that they have to be careful around women, but they are like, but all of a sudden if there's a guy who's attracted to me, now how am I supposed to manage that? Right? Like, what if there's one of those guys who thinks I should be careful being around women? Well, could you be around a gay woman?
Gay man, nice.
And then could you be around a gay man? Yeah. So it's pretty deep.
It just becomes ridiculous.
It
is deep, but it's also ridiculous.
It's very ridiculous.
Almost like we sort of let ourselves use all of it as an excuse, create this whole sort of set of cultural expectations that just mean we don't have to pay attention to those other people. Yeah. It becomes an excuse for being very dismissive or shutting yourself off to what that other gender has to offer you.
Right.
Into having kind of a full set of relationships.
Yeah. Or people are like, what it should be is it should just be a business kind of relationship, but not actually a friendship. And it's not, and sometimes it's just not just moral purists. It's wives who become uncomfortable, or husbands who become uncomfortable when their spouse is a good friend at work with someone that now you're in that work environment, you share that in common, and now you're going out hanging around, and I don't know how to fit into that.
In some ways, right, but I think that, to me, like, sort of which came first in this case. Did the suspicions come first? But I think it's the other way around. I think that the reason, in fact, I think part of the reason affairs happen is because all of a sudden you find yourself emotionally connecting to somebody, and it feels magical because it's unusual.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
Because you haven't had, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, if I'm a married person, I've been married for 10 years, and the only man that I've ever really had much of a deep conversation with is the one I'm married to.
Yeah, the only real man is Jimmy Barnhill.
Right, Jimmy Barnhill. And then all of a sudden, some guy comes along into my life who I had this really great friendship with, and it feels like, boy, we really click. Well, all of a sudden, that becomes magic.
Yeah, right. And the only way you know how to have a relationship.
The only other person I've had that with is the guy I'm married to. Well, it wouldn't be that way if there was a normalcy in male-female relationships where you say, no, I have deep, meaningful conversations with lots of people, and some of them are men and some of them are women. When I meet a woman that way, I don't think, I must be a lesbian because I have this deep emotional connection with this other woman.
Well, some do.
But when it happens with, when it happens with a man, then, with the opposite gender, suddenly we attach all this
I think you're right.
import to it and all this meaning to it because it's so unusual. So I think in some ways, we've allowed the fear of sexual contact and the fear of sexual relationship to actually create that thing. Like it's become dangerous because we think it's going to be dangerous, as opposed to saying, no, it's normal to feel, to have an emotional connection with another person. It happens a lot, and it should happen because we're created to be in relationships with people. And so instead of it freaking us out when it happens, we think, isn't it great? I just made a new friend. And then, so then maybe it doesn't have to be something that that spouses feel uncomfortable about because it's normal. It isn't like, all of a sudden, I mean, I'm like I said, I'm a woman who has a lot of male friends, and I'm married to a man who has a lot of female friends. So for us, it hasn't been an issue because we both get it in the other person. I get that women like Jimmy because he speaks their language, but it isn't an issue for us because I'm not afraid of those relationships in his life because I have those same kinds of relationships in my life, and it doesn't threaten me because I know it's not the same thing as what we have. Just because he has a nice friendship with a woman, it's the same thing that he and I have. It's not scary to me.
I think what's interesting in the parenting role is how could you develop that kind of capacity in children? Like is there an intentional way to parent toward cross-gender friendships?
Yeah, I got a couple of thoughts on that. I mean, part of it is you don't even have to develop it. I dropped my 4-year-old at a little preschool thing today, and she was excited to see her friend Jake as she used to see her friend Helen. Yeah.
Hey, Kate, can we let's tackle that here after the next after the recording because I have we have those kind of recording issues. So the news brought to you by the Onion Radio Network.
The makers of Dixie Cups debuts a new line.